Hey guys, this is the Casual Fan. The first half of the season is done. And once the first half is done, I had a few questions. The first question is what I'm going to pose to you guys in this video. Now, the last few races, if you look at it from the Mercedes point of view, there's something that is quite clear, and that is how the tides have turned between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Even before the start of the weekend, it's almost expected and it can almost be assumed that George Russell will be playing catch up against Lewis Hamilton, especially since the upgrade at Monaco. You can almost see how Lewis has slowly been able to stretch the gap against Russell. And the question is whether Mercedes will be worried they have picked the wrong driver to be the successor for Lewis Hamilton. Let's take a look. Now, first of all, when we talk about George Russell, I think it's safe to say that the driver has been very impressive. His first season with Mercedes was arguably more impressive than even I would have expected. George was able to start the season and arguably adapt a bit earlier to the uncompetitive Mercedes as compared to Lewis. Now, as the season progressed, Lewis was able to catch up. However, one thing stood out by the time the season ended. The most of the standout moments belonged to George Russell. When we look at the points tally, George outscored Lewis by 35 points. When we look at the standout results, George was the only one that secured a pole position for Mercedes. Then when we look at the wins tally, it was again George who was able to accomplish that. And he accomplished that by fending off Lewis at the end of the race in Brazil. If we take a look at the 2022 season in isolation, one can almost assume that some level of evolution, a bit of maturity, and a bit of experience gained by being with Mercedes, and by 2023, George would take another step in terms of performance. Now, this is where the 2023 Formula One season has been worrisome. Now, George started the 2023 season somewhat on a positive note. He was pretty much on the pace with Lewis. There wasn't much of a gap between the two. But once the Monaco upgrade was introduced, George has been playing catch up. Overall, if we take a look at the season and some of the standout statistics, we have George 5-7 down in qualifying. We have George 3-9. That is how much he trails Lewis by in the races. And then we look at the points tally. He's 49 points behind Lewis at this stage of the season, and we're only halfway through. When you look at these tallies, you see how much of a gulf there is between the two drivers right now. To add to this, we look at the standout result, and once again it is Lewis who secured the pole position at Hungary, not George. On the other hand, George started that particular race outside of top 15, while Lewis was on pole position. That is where the gulf is. And even arguably one of the bigger surprises has been the fact that before the start of this season, when you head to a race weekend and one asks at Mercedes which driver is going to perform better, it was tough to make a prediction. On some race weekends, one could pick Lewis Hamilton, and on the others, one could pick George Russell. Now, recently, the way the trend has been, it has become much more predictable. Almost every race weekend, irrespective of the track, Lewis Hamilton has held an edge, and George Russell has been playing catch up. What makes it worse is the frequency with which George is making mistakes. You take a look at his season and you take a look at some grave mistakes that he did not even make earlier in 2022. You look at his mistake in Canada and it probably cost him a shot at podium. You look at his mistake in Monaco and it definitely cost him a podium. And that is where the problem begins. In 2023, Russell was expected to take the next step. He was expected to have a sort of evolution and become better as driver. He's not. That has not been the case, and that is where the problem begins for Mercedes, and so does the worry. Now, the reason why this is worrisome is because George Russell was signed by Mercedes to succeed Lewis Hamilton. Now, this is where it gets problematic. Lewis right now is close to 40 years of age. He's not at his prime. There's no doubt about it. At his prime, Lewis was a different beast. Now, of course, he hasn't faded as much as probably other drivers would, and he's still very competitive. And even in the ratings that I did, he's the third best driver on the grid right now. But is he better than a Max Verstappen? Arguably not. Right now, if we assume that Max Verstappen is performing at a level 100, then we have Lewis Hamilton performing at probably a level 95. That's not a huge difference, but there is a difference nonetheless. This is where the problem comes in for Mercedes. What Mercedes wanted from George Russell was a next step in evolution where he was either level with Lewis in terms of performance or even better. What we are seeing right now is that he's not able to do that. And most importantly, if George Russell is not even able to beat Lewis Hamilton in the same car, then how can he even compete with the Max Verstappen? George is the guy that Mercedes was hoping to build the team around. But with the way that he's been performing, George might be a step down from Lewis. And if that is the case, how can Mercedes bank on George to beat a Max Verstappen? I don't think it can. But that is where you guys come into the picture. You let me know, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that Mercedes has made the wrong call by picking George Russell as the successor of Lewis Hamilton? Drop your views in the comment section and let me know. Please like the video, share it with your friends, ask their views, and of course, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.